Lesson 1.4 is about comparing and ordering integers. So before we know how to compare and order them, we have to know what an integer is. An integer is a number that's on the number line. It could be both negative and positive. 0 is also an integer. So like, let's say like negative 3 is an integer. Negative 7 is an integer, 0 is an integer, 1 is an integer, 3, 5, 10, all these are integers. Every number that's on the number line is an integer. Negative integers and positive integers are just the ones that are positive or negative. So like positive integers and negative integers. Positive integers would be not including 0, so not including 0. Everything that goes after, everything that's positive, everything that's in the positive direction. And negative integers, not including 0, this is 0. Not including 0 is everything that goes in the negative direction. Meanwhile, an integer is just everything that goes in both directions, like in everything. Okay, so when we graph and order integers, let's do it in example 1. Example 1, to determine which has the lowest, graph the integers on a number line. So when we graph integers on a number line, the first thing we have to do is make a number line, and the points we have to graph are negative 70, negative 54, negative 35, negative 19, and negative 9. These are all negative integers. So let's say we have, this is 0. Since everything's in the negative direction, we don't really care about the positive direction, even though there could be, but the ones we have to graph are not. So we have 0. Let's make this negative 10, negative 20, negative 30, negative 40, negative 50, negative 60, negative 70, negative 80, and negative 90. Okay, so we have to graph first negative 9. Let's put negative 9. I'm going to draw it in another color so it's easier to see. Negative 9. It's a little bit over here because it's not negative 10, but it's not 0 either. We have to graph it in between these two, but more towards the negative 10. Negative 19. Exactly the same to the right of the 20 because it's not on 20 exactly. It's a little less, a little more in the positive direction. Negative 35, it's dead center between negative 30 and negative 40, which would be negative 35. Negative 54, almost in the dead center, a little bit more to the right, between negative 50 and 60. And then negative 70 is exactly this point, which we have right here. That's how we would graph them on a number line. So then, this is all example 1. Then we get to learn absolute value, which has a sign. I'll show it to you guys right now. Absolute value. An absolute value is it's the distance from 0. A number's distance from 0. So this is just, it's a unit. It's not positive or negative. So let's say we have negative 17, 0. The absolute value is this distance. This is 17. So this is the symbol for absolute value, this right here. Like, so of whatever number. So here we have the absolute value of -17. The distance of -17 from 0 equals 17. So it's basically, if you have -17, its distance from 0 is 17. If you have 17, like positive 17, its distance from 0 is still 17. So then this brings us to example 2. It's where we have to state the absolute value. Example 2. We have to state the absolute value, which is the distance from 0 of two different numbers. Let's go. A is 5. So let's say 5's distance from 0 on the number line. We have 0, 5. How much units are in this distance? So we have to find out what the absolute value of 5 is, which equals 5. This is the absolute value of 5. If we have B, which is -7, the absolute value of -7. So we would get the absolute value of -7. This equals 7. Is in a number line. If we have -7 over here, we have 0 over here. This distance is 7. So absolute value of -7 would be 7. This is all example 2. Example 3. Oh no, before we learn example 3, we have to know what an opposite is. So an opposite is two numbers with the same absolute value but different signs. So this would be like -5 and 5. But like the absolute value of -5 would be 5, and the absolute value of 5 would be 5. They have the same absolute value, different signs, so they're opposites. -20 and 20. The absolute value of -20 equals 20, and the absolute value of 20 equals 20. They have the same absolute value, different signs, so they're opposites. So this brings us to example 3. In example 3, we're going to be finding opposites, which is similar to what we did here. So if we have to state the opposite of a number, so A, we get 6. What's the opposite of 6? So what's the other number that has a different sign than 6 that will have the same absolute value? This will be -6, because the absolute value of 6 equals 6, and the absolute value of -6 equals 6 as well. So these two are opposites, and this can be proven in a number line, because here we're going to see 0, -6, 6. We're going to see this distance equals 6 and this equals 6. Their absolute values are equal. They have different signs. So they're opposites. This brings us to B. B, we have -15. So what's the opposite of -15? What number that has a different sign than -15, so that has a positive sign, will have the same absolute value as -15? This is 15, because the absolute value of -15 equals 15. Its distance from 0 is 15. And the absolute value of 15 equals 15 as well. So this distance from 0 is 15, and this distance from 0 is 15. Once again, we could prove this on a number line by putting -15 0, 15. This distance will be equal to this distance. Like the distance from negative 15 to 0 will be 15, and the distance from 0 to 15 will be 15. The absolute values are equal, the signs are different, they're opposites. Example 4. Example 3. Example 4 will be evaluating like different expressions when y equals -5. So once again, we're going to bring our knowledge from lesson 1.1 and bring it into here of applying, like implementing variables into expressions. So if a is -y and we plug in -5 for y, so this would bring us negative, and then what's y? Y equals -5. -5. And negative of a negative is a positive. So what's negative? -5. That's 5. I like to think of it as if you have this and this, they come together and make an addition. Like when they're like that of each other. They come together and they make an addition. So this equals 5 when we plug in y equals -5. B, 17 minus absolute value of y. This is when we start to use what we learned in this chapter, absolute value. So this would equal 17 minus absolute value of -5. So this is 17 minus, what's the absolute value of -5? 5. So -5's distance from 0 is 5. So 17 minus 5. And then we get this to be 12. And this was